and let us all do we can to build a better future. There's a big old panic. A big old panic. Turns out we're going to, I haven't done this in a while, Biden it up. Let's talk about Joe Biden. Joe Biden sees warning signs with independent voters in lackluster polls. Well, because Joe, independent voters like myself, do not want to be subservient to the Democratic Party. I remember Philly in 2016. Hell, I remember 2020, how everyone in corporate media was vilifying independent voters and third-party voters. So President Biden is seeing warning signs with independent voters nearly a year out of election day, with new polls suggesting he's losing support from crucial groups poised to decide who will next serve in the White House. Because, yes, he's losing black voters. He's losing black voters to Donald Trump. I know. He's losing black voters to Dr. Cornel West. He's losing black voters who don't want to be engaged in electoral politics at all. But he's losing everyone, not just black voters. Biden is losing everyone. And independent voters make up 50% of the true electorate. We are the silent majority. Independent voters reported a lackluster 36% approval rating of Biden in an NBC News poll taken in mid-September, and 3 in 5 Democrats and Democrat-leaning independents in the Washington Post ABC News poll said they want a nominee other than Biden. The numbers could mean trouble for Biden in the general election, especially if it's a rematch against former President Trump. Now, again, there are 2 other candidates in the Democratic primary that have filed the correct paperwork, one of them being Marianne Williamson and RFK Jr. Now, notice, again, the Democratic Party is like, if only there was another nominee we could pick. This is why I said to RFK Jr. and Marianne Williamson when they made their announcements on our show, not on our show, but when we covered it on our show, like, guys, you're wasting your time. They're like, hello, we're over here. Hello, you know. But it's interesting. There are going to be a fair number of cross-pressured voters, including many people who consider themselves independents, who hold a negative view of Biden, like myself and Trump. These are the folks who are going to decide the election, said Kyle Kondik, managing editor of Cepino's Crystal Ball at the University of Virginia Center for Politics. Crystal Ball. There was a K in there. I was wondering if her association. So Trump's support among likely Republican primary voters, meanwhile, has seen continued surge despite facing a myriad of legal troubles. But that's a different matter among voters who are not staunchly GOP. So I want to pull up this video here because now, again, the Biden administration is concerned, discussing how independents don't want to support Joe Biden. Shout out to Case Study QB.
Look at how many of them say that they would potentially back a third-party candidate. If you add it all up, it adds up to...
Look at that. Those are beautiful numbers. And no, liberals, I don't care if Trump is winning. All right. I care more about independents. I care more about third parties. Now, no labels candidate, again, to anyone supporting no labels, that's both a Democratic and Republican think tank organization. It's filled with centrists and corporatists. You don't want to associate yourselves with that no labels thing. It's bad. It's bad. Okay. The same people you don't like are the ones who made no labels. They're not good people.
14%.
That's right.
That has to be a real concern for the White House, for Biden allies, because of course, a third-party candidate, if one does get into the race till the end,
That's right.
The thinking is it would hurt President Biden.
And you notice a 3-point difference there between Mr. Trump and Mr. Biden. That's within the margin of error on these kinds of polls. So not great numbers. And also that we're hearing, of course, Mr. Kennedy is considering a third party right now, and he has already been polling in double.
Now, to be very clear here, again, he's talking to, his team, and I covered this on yesterday's show, him potentially maybe joining the Libertarian Party. Now, nothing is written in stone. He did speak to a few members at Freedom Fest, and I did speak to Larry Sharp just some time ago yesterday via text message on Twitter, and he was there at the same event in which he spoke to which RFK Jr. spoke to the head of the Libertarian Party, and all was a cordial conversation. Again, until he makes an announcement, let's not jump to conclusions that that's what RFK Jr. is going to do. In my opinion, I think it would be the smart choice. He should have done that from day one and not waste a single precious second being associated with the Democratic primary, because the Democratic primary is rigged. So, again, this is my opinion, even to Marianne Williamson, and I'm not a fan of her campaign. I think it's a glorified book tour, but to both campaigns and to supporters, I get it, running a Democratic primary, but you're wasting your time. The smarter decision would have been to run independent. And if RFK Jr. were to make that bold step to run in the Libertarian Party, I think it would be a smart move, because then he doesn't have to worry about the DNC and, well, just how they do rigged primaries. This isn't open for a discussion. The Republican primary is more Democratic than the Democratic primary.
Double digits in some cases when just looking at potential Democratic primaries. This is why every single constituency matters. And that's why something like this UAW strike really makes a difference for President Biden, because this is a group that helped put Mr. Trump into the White House in 2016 with just enough voters there. In 2020, they broke for President Biden by about 56 to 42 over then President Trump. And in 2023, what we're now seeing is a backsliding in support there. When you're talking about voters who do not have a college degree, we've seen a softening of support there, similar to the softening you covered earlier with Black voters, young voters, Latino voters, independents. Each of these core groups matters, and that enthusiasm gap is huge. It's a huge problem for the Biden administration.
But then again, too, if we look at the Biden administration, they're going to be on the picket line. Remember what Biden did to the railroad workers and to anyone who's part of the UAW. You have every right to strike, but just remember about Joe Biden. How long is he going to be there speaking with all of you? Or will he send his team? Or will he send a representative? Because again, until Biden actually shows up, I do have to call into question the sincerity of this move, because Biden does need those votes. He truly does. But this is like a click, copy, paste attempt of what Donald Trump is going to do. And so what the Biden administration is trying to do is get there ahead before Donald Trump. Because Trump said on the media and on social media that he was going to visit the UAW strikers. So let's talk about Biden and his team. The White House is still trying to figure out who the UAW president is, and he's a Bernie Sanders progressive, so it made it a little bit more complicated. Uh-oh. Hey, Bernie, you sure dropping out being a cuck was a smart move?
Yeah. Here you're going to have this split screen with President Biden in Michigan and then former President Trump on Wednesday in Detroit. He's trying to counter-program the GOP primary debate, but talk about the politics of this decision to go, because some union workers on the front line say, don't turn this into a political event. We want a deal.
Well, Democratic officials, we should say, NBC News has learned, had invited President Biden to come out on Labor Day to first make a visit. The president balked at that, is now going to be going after Sean Fain, the UAW president, invited him. The key takeaways here are a couple. One, the White House is still trying to figure out exactly who the UAW President Sean Fain is. The president doesn't have a long relationship with him. He's a Bernie progressive, right? So it's made it a little bit more complicated. When the president gets out.
No, it doesn't make it more complicated. No, what it does, it shines on a light that Bernie Sanders had an opportunity and he screwed it up because he was a cuck. I do want to shout out to Zach Boyles, who wrote, "No, Bernie wasted our time. I'm not sure who this Marianne Williamson is. Don't worry, she's a waste of time. But exposing the rot out in the open is valuable. Bernie had a great opportunity, but cucked it." Look, I understand where a lot of people feel like it's important to expose the DNC, and yes, it should be. They've already admitted that they're a private institution. They can rig who they want, and they don't care. They don't care who they have to step on in order to make sure the establishment has their pick. Now, if RFK Jr. wants to go all the way, I'm going to make this solemn promise. Yes, Hardlens Media will be covering the DNC convention here in Chicago. And if RFK Jr. is there, I do hope that he's able to put up a fight. But again, Nico House and so many other independent reporters and commentators did extensive coverage in 2016 and, yes, in 2020, exposing how the DNC rigged their primaries. And, yes, the general election can be dirty too, but the DNC, they are world heavyweight champions.
There this week, though, when you speak to Democratic allies, as I have in the last couple of days, they say two things. One, this is the most obvious thing for the president. Two, this is core to who he is. But two, they also acknowledge there's a bit of a risk here, because by going to the picket lines, as he plans to do, you also potentially own the outcome here. And if it's not the one that the UAW workers like, perhaps it could be a problem. It is a delicate, tricky political scene for him.
Fascinating point.
Now, I want to pull up this next video here because, again, another thing that's going to be talked about is Biden's age. We've seen Biden speak, and I'm just wondering what kind of speech is he going to have with UAW workers? And we saw him on the campaign trail in 2020, where he literally got into an argument with a worker there and said, "Hey, I'll fight you right now," or "Let's do push-ups." Let's pull up this video here.
They need to take the age question on head on. He should say, President Biden should say, that Trump is only 3 years younger than me. So what are we talking about? Who sounds like they're old and out of it? Somebody calling for the execution of General Milley, or someone that is trying to deal with these issues?
Well, Biden, listen. Al, can I call you Al? Listen, buddy. Biden has had a history. There are so many videos of this man not knowing where he's at. I mean, my favorite video of him was when he's in Vietnam just a few weeks ago and says, "I don't know about you guys, but I'm going to go to bed." That's a perfect sum up of the Biden-Harris administration, going to sleep.
And I might remind people, in the Democratic primaries in 2020, the youth candidate was Bernie Sanders, who's 2 years older than Joe Biden.
He wasn't a youth candidate. People actually had this false notion of hope in Bernie, and they were horribly disappointed in the fact that Bernie Sanders cucked out and became a DNC sheepdog. These are facts, and people liked Bernie Sanders' message more than Biden. Biden was making sure that nothing would fundamentally change, and nothing did fundamentally change. In corporate media, I find it now how you're citing Bernie now, but wasn't it too long? It wasn't too long ago where you made him public enemy number one, especially everyone at MSNBC. You would think it'd be Fox News vilifying Bernie Sanders, but MSNBC, CNN, and everyone else in corporate media did everything they could to present Bernie Sanders as a troublemaker. Hell, a lot of you used to call Bernie Sanders supporters racist, straight white men. What happened? Got a new script? That's probably what happened.
I didn't hear anyone asking Bernie Sanders about his age while young progressives was rallying around him. Take the issue head on.
They did, Al. Can I call you Al? They did. They did attack Bernie Sanders' age. Everyone did that.
Take it off the table, and then you can get to the record that you set. Compare the economy under me with compare it under Trump. Unemployment was almost double. I think you can win that debate if you have the right debate. They need to take.
I like to have hope. I truly do. I want to believe. I really do want to believe that we'll get to a better future, but the evidence is clear. This entire administration has literally crapped the bed. Joe Biden has crapped his pants, and he's going to have to wallow in this waste. Kamala Harris is an incompetent vice president. Her approval rating is lower than Biden's. And that's how bad it is. Look, I believe in challenging the two-party system. Now, I don't care if this triggers the liberals. That's because that's not my job. My job is not to make you feel better. My job is to observe, give commentary, and give my analysis of what's happening in today's current events. And each of you has to come up with your own conclusions as well. But the evidence is abundantly clear. The Democrats failed to follow through with their promises. They failed to represent us. And now they're coming at us again, begging like dogs for our votes. Well, my vote isn't entitled to them. You got to earn it. And you've done nothing to prove or earn my vote. Now, I'm going to vote independent. Probably this might be my last election to really vote because I'm not overall impressed with certain campaigns' decisions, but it is what it is. The ink is already dry. But my vote is not going to go to the Democrats or Republicans. And I made it clear that in my state, if I can't vote independent or third party, I will leave it blank. Because I don't represent or support the Republican establishment or the Democratic establishment. You're not going to get my vote. And so if people want to bully you or yell at you because how dare you make that decision, well, that's your decision. Don't let these people bully you on social media. We've seen their tactics. We've seen their fear strategies and how they want to bully you and make you feel less. You push right back. Again, when it comes down to me covering the election and what will happen on election night, here's one thing that I'm going to be consistent on. And I don't care if it triggers anyone, but this is what I'm going to do on election night. I'm going to cover it, but I'm also going to cook myself a nice ribeye steak dinner, have some nice side dishes, a slice of cheesecake, a glass of wine, a glass of whiskey, and a little bit of some of that emerald green smoke. Why? Because I want to feast on liberal tears and panic. Because that's the only way I'm going to get through this election. I'm not going to put my entire hope into a campaign, because hope is the first path to disappointment. But I will be covering it and giving it my point of view, and I'll be enjoying it all on election night to see how it all plays out. It'll be fun. So stay tuned to Hard Lens Media. It's going to be an interesting election year in 2024. Stay tuned.